I'm Andrew Willett for A Pro Basketball Show. Follow and subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, as well as following on social media at APBShow on Twitter and Instagram. Be sure to follow me as well at TheACWillett22. Thank you so much for tuning in, and without further ado, hello and welcome everyone to A Pro Basketball Show. I am so happy now to be joined by Ashlee Woods, and we've been chatting it up here prior to the episode. But Ashlee Woods, a student at the University of Alabama, the People's Editor-in-Chief over at the Crimson White, and covering the W for Winsidr, as well as a communications intern over with Drum Corps DCI. If you've got any fans out there, I know we'll both be at the Muncie show here soon. But Ashlee, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited for this episode. We're going to talk a lot. We're going to go Indiana Fever, and then we're going to go into the All-Star starters because those were released recently, and a little bit of controversy, despite every single one of the starters being very deserving of that spot. But we'll get into that. But we're going to start with the Indiana Fever. We're both based in Indiana for the summer, and so we get to be a little bit more up close than maybe other people covering the W at different stages. But for starters, with this Indiana team, I just think they are so fun. And so my question to you, at just 5-9, that's their record, what makes this team so much fun?
I think they're just more competitive than they have been in years past. And part of that is getting arguably one of the best players in the 2023 draft, and Aliyah Boston. They just have a different energy about them this year, and it's just so much more fun to watch. I mean, you walk down the street in downtown right before a Fever game, you'll see Fever jerseys. I was at a restaurant across the street after the Aces game on June 4th, and I remember hearing people started chanting because they saw Aliyah Boston, and I heard teammates walking down the street. I mean, this city has really bought into what the Fever are putting on the court, and sometimes they've been really close to getting some wins and they've fallen short, but I just really think the potential of this team being great is something that the city is really trying to buy into, and it's something that the city really needs, especially in the shadows of Tamika Catchings fully leaving the organization. She was in the front office for a little bit, but now she's fully out of the Indiana Fever organization, so they've kind of been in limbo, for lack of a better word. So, yeah, I think it's just really the fact that they got Aliyah Boston with the number one pick. You know, you have Melissa Smith in her second year. You got Queen in her second year. You have Erica, she's been with them for a little bit. And you also add in Indiana University star Grace Berger. You just have all of these connections with different fan bases in college. But, yeah, this city has just really embraced the potential of this young team, or a mixture of a young and experienced team here in Indianapolis. That's where I left off. Okay, cool. Okay.
Sweet. Yeah, we are doing this thing. Ashlee, thank you so much again for joining. As we look at this Fever team, and I mean, I've noticed it. I've been able to go to a few games down in Indianapolis. And the arena is a little bit more full than I remember it being in the past. Growing up here, I went to quite a few Fever games outside of the finals, which was definitely packed when I was able to go to that in 2015. It's had its times where it hasn't been the most full, and then especially recently. I mean, 11th or 12th in 5 of the last 6 seasons. So the way that they are going out and competing, I think, has been otherworldly, and we'll touch on them a little bit more right here. I kind of dive into both the offensive and the defensive sides of the ball, Ashlee. As I mean, on the offense side, this team is 3rd in offensive rating, which when I saw that going and looking back at stats, I was like, "Are you kidding me?" this young Indiana Fever team is able to hit third. That's fantastic. They don't assist a whole lot, 12th in assist percentage. They rebound at a very high clip, but 8th in defensive rebounding. So a lot of that comes down to the offensive rebounding. They're creating a lot of second chance shots, which is probably in large part why they are third in field goal percentage as well, shooting 44%, because it's definitely not the three-pointers, which I believe is 9th or so, 32%, but they aren't taking a lot of them either.
No.
And so
I think, I think a lot of that is just, when you have somebody like Aliyah Boston and then even Queen coming off of the bench in the paint, you really should utilize that pick and roll, that high-low action, or because you're going. Aliyah Boston's just so good on both sides of the bucket, and Queen's improved as well on both sides of the bucket. They're going to find a way to get that ball into in the hoop around that 0 to 10 feet range. I'm like, if you got them there, good luck, because they're going to find a way to the basket. They're going to find
that they are. Yeah, well, and as I was just talking about that offense, that they don't shoot it well from three. They don't shoot it well from the free throw line, but they don't really shoot from those places very often throughout the game. So I think they're really sticking to their strengths. They take care of the ball well. They get the offensive rebounds, and it's really what has propelled this offense under Christy Sides. Been a big fan of that, and I think you just mentioned kind of Queen Edbo and Alyssa Smith, the high-low, and Aliyah Boston down low, the high-low connection. So I'm going to transition that right here to Alyssa Smith and Aliyah Boston. What do you like about this pairing? Why does it work so well?
I think the pairing works so well because it allows Alyssa to go outside of the arc. That is something that she's been trying to work on since she got drafted from Baylor a couple seasons ago. And having Aliyah in the paint allows her to do high-low action. It allows Aliyah to, draw defenders in and then maybe kick it out to Melissa just for a three-pointer. It just really has, having Aliyah in that locker room has just allowed Melissa to develop other parts of her offensive game that she just couldn't develop last season without Aliyah, because she was that person alongside Queen inside. And I really think some of her best work, Melissa's best work, is really in that 12 feet to like 25 feet range, where she's getting into the mid range, where she's going outside the arc in the 3-point range. Really, that's where her best work is. And of course, when she's in the paint, she's really good in the paint. But I really just think it's allowed her to flourish as another side of her game that maybe a lot of people haven't been exposed to prior to the season. Even in 2022, she shot over 30% from three. It's just allowed her to flourish. Aliyah Boston being in the paint just allowed her to flourish.
Yeah, and with Melissa there, you talked about that mid-range game. I went and saw her in the preseason. That shot looks pure when it's going down. I think there are times where she definitely used it in a little bit more consistent from outside the paint, but have really liked what I've seen from both of them, especially together. I think that pairing just for the next forever is going to be incredible. Before we touch on a few more pieces of this Indiana team, we talked about the offense. Really, really good so far under Christy Sides. The defense, not quite as much, but they are staying very competitive in these games. They are 10th in defensive rating, 8th in defensive rebound rate. Like we said, the offensive rebounds make up for a lot of that. But why do you think this team struggles a little bit on the defensive side of the court?
I wouldn't say struggles. I mean, they do have their issues a little bit. I really think there are times where they are really struggling in the transition game, and that's where a lot of that issues come to size, when they're like making errors on offense that allow for quick, easy buckets. I remember the Mercury really exposed the transition game, the lack of transition game sometimes Indiana has. But I do think they have some good defenders on their team. I just don't think it's clicked yet. I mean, they have Lexi Hall, Of course, they have Aliyah Boston. Victoria Saxton when she does get in sometimes. Grace Berger is also really good on defense, especially at the one spot because she's going to go up and get some really tough shooters at that one spot. I think they have some really good defenders on the team. I just think it hasn't clicked all the way yet. I also think there is just some times where they do have a good defensive effort and the offense just makes a great shot. And that's just basketball. You lock in for those 24 or so seconds on defense, and then it's down to the last bit, and the opponent just makes a great shot. And there's nothing much you can do. Is just check the ball in and go down the court and make something out of it. But I really do think sometimes in that transition game, especially in transition defense, there's sometimes where they have trouble getting back. And then I also think sometimes in that half-court defense, when it's later on in the shot clock, I think sometimes the opponent maybe finds something late that Indiana may have let slip by, and there's a good shot there. I don't think they're terrible on defense by any stretch of the imagination. I just think there are times where a little blip in focus allows an opponent to just get on by.
Absolutely, and I find it interesting that you point out the transition defense because that was the other stat. This team 11th in pace, so maybe trying to play into kind of a slower ball game because that's where they are able to limit those transition opportunities and on offense find their spots because they have several players who can go. You give them the ball, they're going to go to their spot and probably get a bucket. For me on the defensive side, I think the guards, and Christy loves her 3-guard lineups. I think they're just a little short, and that can hurt sometimes, especially in the pick and roll. And it really leaves a lot for Aliyah to have to maybe clean up at the rim, to where I think, and she's been outstanding on both sides, but I think defensively she can probably improve a little bit more from year 1 to year 2, and going forward into her career, where she's being asked to do quite a bit as just a rookie, going up against veterans who are so strong. And she's maintaining, she's fighting hard. But I think with maybe some taller wing defenders out on the perimeter, as well as Aliyah getting a little bit stronger on defense, figuring out that footwork. I know she dealt with foul trouble early on in her career, hard for her to stay out there. But she's quickly figuring that out, and like you said, I don't think they're terrible either. But I'm just curious about, if the offense is this good, third in the league, the defense, if they can raise that up even a little bit higher, how good can this team be? And so that's the question. Do you think this team can, and obviously they're vying for a spot right now, can they make the playoffs this year?
Oh, that's a great question. I think they can, and a lot of it is the effort on the defensive side of the ball. This is a tough league. People are going to make their shots. There are teams that have 6 foot plus throughout 1 through 5, and even onto their bench. So with Indiana being undersized in some of those key spots, and like shooting guard in the strong forward areas and shooting forward, sometimes being a little bit undersized in those areas, I think can be a bit of an issue. But I also think if they lock in defensively, really working on rebounding the ball, limiting second chance points for their opponents, and just finding a way to, lock in, and maybe you don't get a shot clock violation, but you make somebody take a terrible shot, or you get back on transition defense, so you eliminate that quick, that fast break opportunity. I think a lot of what separates this team from being a playoff team and missing the playoffs yet again really lies on the defensive side of the ball. I really think, I don't want to say they have the offense figured out completely, because there are still some times where the offense just doesn't work completely. Case in point was the Aces game, I believe, just a few days ago, where Aliyah didn't get many touches in the fourth quarter. I don't think she got any, if I remember correctly. So there are still some kinks to figure out on offense, but a lot of the kinks that they need to figure out to be a playoff team lie on that defensive side of the ball.
So, Ashlee, I think the point from this, for me, is do you want to be a playoff team? As it is, there are going to be some very good draft classes here in the next couple of seasons. And I don't know if I have Nalissa Smith and Aliyah Boston down low, if I wouldn't want like a perimeter threat like a Caitlin Clark or a Paige Beckers out on the perimeter. And so, what do you think from that standpoint? Do you just full plunge, go right ahead for the playoffs, for that playoff experience for this young team, or where are you at from that standpoint?
If the opportunity is there, I'm not going to tell nobody to not take a playoff spot. If the opportunity is there, go ahead and take it. There are these next two draft classes are stacked with guards all throughout. Yes, yeah, there are a lot of guards. You got Paige, you got Caitlin, Haley Van Lith if she decides to come out, Anita Morrow. She plays guard forward. There are plenty. That's within the SEC. Just the SEC alone, two of those players are in the SEC. I mean, there are guards out there. And not even just the draft classes coming up. There are free agent guards out there. Bree Bill is one that's floating around. Destiny Henderson, if they decided they wanted to bring her back because they see what she's doing in LA.
I know.
My team is the Sparks, I would prefer definitely stayed in LA. But there are experienced guards currently in the league that if they do decide to, you're a professional team, so you have the opportunity to make a playoff push, you're going to make that push. If they do get in the playoffs, and maybe they're not sitting pretty for Caitlin Clark or Paige, if she does decide to enter the draft next year, they can find somebody that's sitting there waiting for a team. They can find somebody that's out there. I don't think making the playoffs hinders this team at all. I actually think it benefits them in the long run. It can be beneficial because there are other ways to find guards that will fit with this team.
That's a very good point. And probably, you don't want to upset the basketball gods. You go and if you have a chance and you can, you don't make the playoffs. That's a fair point. I just think about the star talent in these next couple of drafts. I probably wouldn't want to miss out on it. That's me personally, though. Looking, one last question here with Indiana is they've got a lot of talent, young talent that is, but how much of it do you think is really potentially a piece to build on in the future? I know Aliyah Boston, Nalissa Smith obviously are the building blocks. But then players like Grace Berger, Queen Edbo, I feel like Victoria Vivians has the potential to be like an elite role player and maybe like a 7th or 8th spot off the bench role. Victoria Saxton has some potential on defense. And then I'm really high on Kelsey Mitchell. What pieces do you think? I didn't even mention Lexi Hull. That's on me. But who do you think Indiana could keep and continue to build around this core?
Well, yeah, I mentioned in my piece, the future of the Indiana Fever really does rely on Aliyah Boston. And it's crazy to put so much pressure on just one player, but
a rookie too.
She's your first number one overall pick. Her game and just her persona is just so similar to what the Fever had with Tamika for so long. I really think it starts there, and then you already have a guard that just works so well with her and Grace Berger, to where if you maybe don't get the star power guard this upcoming year, you have somebody that can really develop into a true point guard in Grace Berger. And then there's also Lexi Hull. She spent some time in Athletes Unlimited, really working on her three ball, and I do think when she's in a little bit of a shooting rut at the moment, but once that three ball is clicking, it's such a smooth jump shot that she has, and I think the pieces are there. I really think it's up the Christie side to configure those pieces in the right way for success. But I do think it starts with Aliyah. You have Grace at the 1, Nalissa working high-low action. That's not a bad core to start off with. Have all put some veteran members like like Christy Wallace and Kelsey Mitchell around those players, and you got something to work with there. I mean, it's working so far. You got 5 games, which is more games than you. It's tying the amount of games you won last season, and we're only in June. So
they've been really impressive. Like you said, it's worked so far. And I know, like for me, I am super high on Kelsey Mitchell, as I think she'll be a reserve All-Star. That'll be coming out here soon in the future. But right now, though, as we wrap up Indiana 5-9, we feel good about where they're at. Aliyah Boston, incredible. That will factor in as well to our All-Star talk. But as we get into the starters, I'll go ahead and read off the 10 who made the All-Star game. The 4 guards that were voted in: Jackie Young, Jewel Lloyd, Arike Doumbowale, and Chelsea Gray. And then the 6 front court players: Asia Wilson, Brianna Stewart, Brittany Griner, Satu Sabali, Aliyah Boston, and Netta Ogumache. As this was voted on by fans, they had 50% of the vote. Players, they had 25%, and media had another 25%. As those were announced on June 25th, and it's a little bit of controversy, but we all know that all 10 of these players are all-stars. Maybe they aren't like your individual who you would have had starting, but that's what we're here to talk about today. So, Ashlee, I think I'm going to let you go first. We're going to start with the guards. Who did you see as being all-star starters, that is? Very, very specifically, all-star starters at the guard spot.
You know, it's interesting. I had about currently 2 of the starters on there, and that's Chelsea Gray and Jackie Young. I would be remiss if I did not have those 2 players there. I believe I also had Marina Mayberry there, and Kelsey Mitchell as well. I thought she was playing some really good basketball leading up to the All-Star game. Maybe a controversial pick, but either way, I really went back and forth on Marina and Alicia for the longest time.
Yep.
I probably should have chosen Alicia, but at the end of the day, I can't change. I didn't submit a vote. I didn't submit it. I forgot to hit the submit button. So my screen is just like, I just took a screenshot and then I didn't hit submit. That was crazy. But I think those 4 guards selected, they're some of the best guards. Some of the best guards in the league, yeah.
Yeah, I was a little surprised to hear no Jewel Lloyd come out of your mouth there.
Listen, Jewel Lloyd was also up there as well. I think it was really just, there were so many guards to choose from, and I really was like, do I go this route, do I do this route, or that route? And I went with Marina and Kelsey, and I went back and forth, and I was like, this is my All-Star pick. Ooh.
Yeah. Kelsey was a reserve on my list, so definitely up there. And then Marina, I actually didn't have her as an all-star, but she was definitely on my short list. Kind of an underrated season, I'd say, probably. But I agreed with the 4 starters who were voted in. I think Arike has been really awesome. Kind of a slow start efficiency-wise, but I think stepping up recently with the shot coming back a little bit, and then the playmaking I've been a fan of. And then I'm with you, Jackie and Chelsea. Some of the best seasons that anyone in the W is having right now. So I have them too. And then, Jewel leading the league in scoring on that Seattle team. I had Jewel Lloyd as a starter as well. So I kind of went clean sheet, kind of boring. But those are my guards. How about the 6 front court players? Who did you have? Who did you agree with on this list? This is where it really gets dicey, doesn't it? Because, so many players were deserving.
Yes, I have to pull up the screenshot now. Here it is. Okay. So my 6 front court was Satu, Nneka, Aliyah, Brianna, Nafisa, actually.
I love that pick.
And Asia. The one that I struggled with the most was going back and forth between Nafisa and Alyssa Thomas. I went back and forth on that one. You got Alyssa Thomas, who was in a driver's seat for an MVP bid this season, averaging a triple-double. and impacting other stats on the sheet, blocks, steals. I mean, she's just doing it all on the court. I mean, we saw that football X pass that she made the other day. I mean, she's a playmaker on both sides of the ball.
Gosh.
I really went back and forth, but I just really liked where Nafisa was at. I left Brittany off. I just think between Brittany, C, and AP, I was just like, man, it's so hard for me to pick which one of these three I would honestly like to see. It was just so hard. I went with C.
Yeah. I mean, Nafisa ended up making my reserves, but I mean that just tells you where or how many strong front court players there were, because you could have had any combination of the 10, maybe even more than that, in your starting lineup. For me, with Brittany Griner, it came down to her or Aliyah Boston on my side. And I ended up putting Brittany. I don't know, like, part of me knew that she would get in, but then also I think has had a fantastic season, the lone bright spot. And after returning from all of that in Phoenix, she was an all-star starter for me. But those out there with Asia Wilson, Bree Stewart, I'm up to 3. And I felt good about those 3. Alyssa Thomas had to be in mine. I had to have Alyssa Thomas. I've been high on her since Game 3. She was my Defensive Player of the Year coming into the year. But Game 3 this year, I was like, it's hard to argue. She's the best player on this Connecticut Sun team, and they just keep winning. She's been my MVP since half a week into the season. So I do like Alyssa Thomas there. That's 4. And then my last 2, this might have been a little bit of bias, but Elena Deladon gets into mine. That Washington team gets in there. I covered Monumental Sports and Entertainment not too long ago. And so watching Elena up close like that, she's incredible. I think Washington's kind of turning some things around. She's up there for me. And then Netta Dumate was my final starter. So Netta, EDD, BG, Asia, Brianna Stewart, and Alyssa Thomas, of course. Wrapped up my starters.
Yeah, the Princess of Delaware making it in, Elena Deladon, Delaware icon. Love her. The front court was just, listen, I thought the guards were hard, and then I got to the front court, and I was like, God, okay. There was just so many players in that area of the court that were not only impactful players on their team, but some of them were the best player on their team. Like Alyssa, like Aliyah, like Satu, all those people, they are.
Yes, Satu was hard for me too. Oh.
They were the BG. They're all crucial parts of their team. To where if you take them out of the lineup, where are those teams at now? And it's like, gosh, is it wrong to favor one over the other? It's a lot of back and forth. It was just really interesting to see how everything shook out. I really thought Alyssa was going to make it onto the starters list, but I'm not surprised at all the way that the front court shook out, because all 6 of those players are deserving, and I believe that the fan bases of the WNBA know their basketball, or at least most of them do, and I do believe that they got most of it right. There's not too many that I'm complaining about. I mean, these are some of the best players in the league. When the sad part about something like an all-star game, especially with the way the WNBA season shakes out, only being within the summer months, you only get a snippet of what
it's true.
You only get a snippet of somebody's season, and because it's July and we're already talking about all-star. And I also think just having 10 starters, it's just an elite class to be in. It's a niche class to be in. And there's just some people that are just naturally going to get snubbed, and it's the unfortunate reality. It sucks that the big person that got snubbed was an MVP candidate in Alyssa Thomas, but at the end of the day, she's going to be in Vegas. She's going to be there, and if she's not in Vegas, well, then we have a bigger problem on her hands, because why is she not on the reserve? She should at least be there. But I really do think that this is a good all-star starter list.
Ashlee, I totally agree. I mean, the 10 going there: Jewel Lloyd, Chelsea Gray, Arike Dumbawale, Jackie Young. And then you've got Aliyah Boston, Asia Wilson, Bree Stewart, Brittany Griner, Netta Ogumake, and Satu Sabali. So all very deserving. So are our All-Stars as well. Ashlee, thank you so much for joining me here on a pro basketball show. We had so much fun talking. I love talking Indiana as well, just because they're so close in proximity. But that All-Star game coming on July 15th, I believe. With a whole lot of other festivities, a fun 2-day weekend. Ashlee, thank you so much for joining, and best of luck as the season goes along.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, make sure to follow and subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Make sure to follow on Twitter and Instagram at APBShow, and follow me at the AC Willett 22. Thank you so much for tuning in for a pro basketball show. I am Andrew Willett.